Hi there, I'm Quick Jen, and today I am joined by my friend, High Fist, Erickson's adoptive son and muse, the one and only Ruthan Badd. Welcome.
Thank you, Jen. It's a big pleasure for me to be here in Stephen Erickson's favorite YouTube channel. And I mean yours, not mine. So while it is true that I am sort of in vogue at the moment, I'm quite sure your comeback's impending. So let's see how our rivalry pans out.
Well, maybe we can start with this one. So this is the first time we've actually done a collab, which is kind of crazy.
Well, we were supposed to do a collab on the Bridge Burners, and then you and Ishka, not only as in you sort of stabbed the knife in my back and Ishka twisted it. So it was a betrayal of pretty epic proportions as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, go on.
This is the second time you've publicly announced it. So I'm going to use it as an opportunity to remind you that you actually bailed on us.
Well, as in I had something to do. There's a betrayal, Jen. Come on. You will not find loopholes out of this. You said I mentioned it twice. That's the second of many times. Let me assure you.
God. Just remember who betrayed who here.
I'm Caesar and you're Brutus.
But I'm very happy you're here. I'm excited we finally get to do this. We've been talking for a while about doing a series of short collabs, something that's a little smaller and fits better with my short attention spans. So we are going to kick that off today talking about Lady Envy, which I'm excited. I know she's one of your favorite characters.
Absolutely. And if I'm not mistaken, she's one of your favorites as well.
I think she's a lot of fun. She's a great character to read. I really enjoy her. I don't know if I'd put her on the top of my favorites list, but she's one that makes a huge impression. She's not in a lot of scenes or a lot of books, and yet she's very much stands out, I think. She's one that sticks with you, and she's also a character that I find myself appreciating and enjoying more and more every time I read the series.
Yeah, so I would echo those thoughts. And the one thing I would sort of add to that is that she is a good example of someone who, on the one hand, is on that high level of power to where Erickson can use her for certain plot points, but at the same time, her personality, as you were saying, is just so much fun. And it's so, I guess, charming would be the word to use for it, that you can use her for comedy as well. As in, typically, you will not be able to use characters on that scale of power for humor. Even with someone like Mile, he needs an alter ego like Bug before he can be funny. And with all the others, we don't really see humor and fun being a big part of their journey. Whereas with Lady Envy, she is one of the few people on that ascendant, whatever spectrum of power, where on the one hand, she's a force to be reckoned with, but on the other hand, there's also a certain charisma to her, which is so interesting to follow.
I think it has something to do with sort of that very long-lived or immortal characters tend to be in these books a little I was depressed, like the consequence of having lived for so many years is that loss of humor and enjoyment in life. And Envy is one of the only characters in that, or ascendant, that I can think of that really hasn't, even with Male, like you said, it's something he very much rediscovered through his relationship with T-Halt, not something that was inherent within himself. Whereas Envy is who she is, regardless of who's around her.
This is kind of crystallized in Told the Hounds, where Spite was kind of a contrast to Envy. She has this conversation with Crocus about Darujistan. And she says the terrible thing about being immortal, the terrible thing about living forever, is that you will always see these civilizations rise and crumble. And while they feel that they will be around forever, you know, as an immortal being, that it will crumble. And Crocker says, what are you talking about, Sister Spite? Darujistan is the greatest city of them all. Darujistan has been around for 5,000 years, and it will still be around for the next 5,000 years. And Spite looks at him and says, exactly. So Spite has that sense of, oh my God, I live forever, and it's so boring, blah, blah, blah. But Envy is the opposite. I think it's Tool who even says she lives in the moment, and she lives for her whims. And this is one of the reasons why she still maintains that vigor. Of course, the physical vigor, one could argue, is through sorcery, but the mental vigor, because everyone else is so depressed, everyone else as old as her, almost, they're all depressed. That vigor is because she's constantly living in the moment, and she's constantly embracing her whimsical side. She's not someone who broods and introspects and kind of lets herself get lost in the melancholy of power and immortality, like, let's say, Anamanda Rake and stuff do. And that keeps her so fresh and fun as a character.
I agree. I think it's something I'd love to dig into if we have time, like thinking about her motivations and sort of what drives her, because I think it very much is that's how she's coped with that long period of time, is this by entertaining herself and by finding delight in the things that happen around her, and because sort of viewing it all like it's entertainment for her, which it leads to both some of her most fun moments and also probably some of the things that drive the people around her the most crazy.
Yeah, yeah. And the duality of her nature, I mean, not to plug my own Tihol video once again, but this idea of having a
excellent video, by
exuberant,
the way. What? Excellent video, by the way, loved it.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Yes,
okay.
It's sort of, it's furthered me along the hierarchy on the Erickson bloodline.
You are at the top.
Yeah, I'm at the very top. I mean, I was his adopted son after the Ayn Rand video, and after the Tihol video, I think one of his houses in his will be inherited by me once his estate splits his wealth up. So what I was trying to get to is that when we look at the duality of Lady Envy, it's almost got that same Tihol vibe that I was speaking about, where on the outside, there's a charm and an exuberance and a sense of fun. But once in a while, people see a certain darkness there, which kind of scares them away. The best example being Talk in Memories of Ice, where once in a while he looks at her and he even goes, she's doe-eyed. Like, can you imagine this elder goddess or whatever can shoot him these doe-eyed looks to the point where Talk the younger melts and he's like, there's nothing he can do. And she manipulates him constantly. And she knows that he knows that she's manipulating him. And she also knows that he knows there's nothing he can do about it, which then makes him leave and stuff. But this sort of sense of wanting to have fun with other people. She even tells him, she says, look, I can't have fun conversations with my servants. I can't have it with these two dogs. I can't have it with these three stegulae. You're the only one I can have this connection with, that I can have this kind of, that I can have these conversations with. And you sympathize with her. And in the very next sentence, Talk is like, so what, you just want to play with me? And she doesn't say anything. And Talk can see in her eyes that he's right, that she's saying all this simply because she wants to play around with him. And that then turns into a big reason for why he leaves and all that. So
yeah,
she is a piece of work.
Even that speech, well, I think true, was also a form of manipulation.
Yeah.
It's every interaction is some sort of exchange, and she enjoys having an effect on other people, and so she wants him to want her. But he's right. I think she enjoys his company, but at the end of the day, I don't think he's important to her in and of himself. I think that he's important to her in what he can provide to her.
We don't really see her too worried about him after Memories of Ice either. It's like you have a toy and you're interested in that toy. And once you have a new one, you've forgotten about the old toy. Ironically, the only person she seems to have a lingering sense of a dynamic or a romantic tension or whatever with is Anamanda Rake. Because obviously, I mean, he's Anamanda Rake and there's a long history between them and things like that. But would you say that she is compassionate, or would you say that she's a lot more indifferent to the fate of others? Because I have an interesting comparison with her and Spite, but I was wondering what you thought about that question.
I think in terms of being as long-lived as she is, she's remarkably compassionate, actually. I think that when she doesn't behave with compassion, it's largely because of self-absorption and a lack of awareness of others and really what they're going through, because she's so focused on herself. So it's a selfish sort of compassion, but I also think about the fact that honestly, yeah, for her, humans' lives pass in the blink of an eye. And when you look at her behavior, in general, once she becomes aware of a need, she does her best to help out, to address it. And I think that for the most part, she doesn't behave any worse than most of the humans and a lot better than some. Oh no, I've lost sound.
Oops, I apologize. I was just going to say, so this is why I don't do these collabs too often, Jen, because I'm completely technically illiterate, as you know. So I was going to say, you can hear me now, can't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. So I was going to say, I agree with what you said. And the reason I brought that up was because when we see the envy, spite dichotomy, by the way, my hair's completely out of control, but that's usual, I guess. So when we look at envy and spite, spite seems to have a darker edge to her than envy, in the sense that in the very first meeting, we see her double-crossing the nameless ones and getting that soul-taken divas, whatever, Dejim Nabral, to slaughter them all. But at the same time, spite also has an explicitly heroic side where she risks her life to save Chaw and Silara and all those guys when in the Bone Hunters, when the kind of 5 sons or whatever collapse, and then she jumps into the sea and she rescues Chaw and Barathol, and even though she is gravely injured, she doesn't show it because she says that would be an insult to Barathol and Chaw and the kind of joy that the two of them are. So Lady Envy doesn't do any of that. So we don't see the explicitly dark side, but we don't see her having an explicitly compassionate side either. What we do see though, and this is where I completely agree with you, is that on a day-to-day level, she is not a harsh or mean or rude person in a crude way, as in even with her servants, she always takes with the Segule, that is, she always takes the effort to be courteous. With Talk and with Tool, she always takes the effort to be courteous. Now, of course, we could say that the courteousness is just a facade, or she's just doing it because she's fun or whatever. But once again, the way she speaks and the way she interacts with people, I would say, and I agree with you, that she reveals a far more, I wouldn't say humane side, but a far more human side than most of the other ascendants that we see, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And she even says that when she enslaved the Segula, that essentially they left her no choice. They kept trying to kill her. And so she kind of had to, is how she puts it. I've lost picture now. It's just.
Am I back?
Don't touch anything.
Yeah. I apologize. I was reaching for my bottle of water, by the way, and then I accidentally switched the camera off. So if I'm not mistaken, she says, and this is where her wit comes into play as well. She says they thought they could break the monotony of their journey by killing me. and they were wrong. As in, these guys were just both the three unstoppable segulae who can carve their way through an entire army. They run across this sort of attractive woman traveling by herself, and the three of them think, we're bored. We might as well just chop her head off and slice her to pieces. Little did they know that they were about to take on a pretty long domestic servant assignment, all three of them.
All right, so I have a question for you. Do you think the whole kissing, enslaving people through a kiss, do you think that is a real thing in terms of magic, or is I can't think of any other like major magic user in the series where they do something like so specific like that, where there's this action directly connected to their ability to use magic. And so I'm wondering how much of that do you think is real, that's how she enslaves people, is with her kiss, and how much of it do you think is a metaphor?
Okay, so let's break it down into a couple of different things, right? So firstly, we do know for a fact that both envy and spite are practitioners of mental magic, as in with both envy and spite, we do see them explicitly having the power of telepathy and mind control to a certain extent as well. So in terms of how both of them are characterized, that is a big part of their power set, so to speak. Now, on the point of whether the kiss thing is more of a literal technique or just a metaphor, I would argue that is just a metaphor. As in, I would be very disappointed if an ascendant, a sorceress, whatever you want to call her, who's hundreds of thousands of years old, that she has to kiss you for her to be able to control your mind, because ultimately that wouldn't really be as frightening as, okay, she can just control minds. Mm-hmm. I think the kiss is more of a metaphor to express her individuality. And because of her own charisma, and because she's a very flirtatious person by general, she's very interested in people. And once she finds somebody interesting, she gets attracted to them and she wants that person to be attracted to her as well. Many of the most powerful practitioners of magic have a certain sense of individuality. And that's one thing we've seen in the series. I mean, right from Beak conceptualizing the Warrens as candles to kind of to Tattersale seeing the Warrens as something as power that needs to be drawn from another source. We see that very high level users of magic have kind of imprinted their own stamp on the magic that they use. And it's a reflection of their personality in some way, or their understanding of the world in some way. So it's quite possible that this is far more metaphorical, even though I must admit the fan art and the portraits of Mark with the twin slashes and just the lipstick mark on his mask, that is one of the iconic fan art images from Memories of Ice.
I think that's why I ended up going straight from the Segula into the kisses, because when I think of them, that's what I think of is Mock's mask with the lipstick on the forehead, which, yeah, I love. I agree with you. I think it's an affectation, but I wonder how much, I think the two are not necessarily connected, like her ability to sort of enslave or use magic, and this kiss, that there are sort of two types of enslavement, because we know she can use that magic in other people's minds, but there's a point where Tuck accuses her of using sorcery on him, and she starts talking about the fact that she supposes that he might be right in that desire and attraction in and of themselves are a kind of magic. And I think that is a big part of her interactions and what she does, that it's not all sorcery, but that when we're talking about that enslavement, that in part it's that ability to make others desire her, and to enslave them through that desire.
Yeah, I would completely agree. As in, I was gonna add in my previous sort of rant anyway, that even without the magic, she is an extremely charming, seductive, alluring, persuasive person. So the sort of what makes her interesting is not that she can control minds, is that this whole controlling minds thing is an extension of her actual personality. Her actual personality is as a a person who could turn you like that, a person who could enchant you like that, who could make you kind of fall into a trap instantly, with or without magic.
Yep.
And the best, most powerful users, as I was saying, are those whose actual personalities are an extension of the type of sorcery that they use. So yeah, I would agree that she, it would be a shame for us to look at her mental persuasion simply through the perspective of magic or warrants, which I guess is kind of your point. We do need to realize that this is as big a part of her personality as it is a part of her magic.
It is, and we see that in the way she interacts with others and the way she presents herself, in that she's always spotless. She never has a hair out of place. Um, and it's such a mundane use of magic, especially for someone as old as she is, that it really uh, it highlights just how very important that is, how she appears to others.
Yeah, there's a scene where Talk the Younger is shocked when they just meet and they've just started traveling. So they travel for like 2 days or 3 days or whatever through this volcanic area, and the entire thing is just covered in black ash. The air itself is just black ash. And as they leave, Talk is busy trying to dust all the ash from his body. And he looks around and he sees that her white tulaba is absolutely spotless.
Mhm.
She has been marching with them through this black cloud of ash and volcanic dust. And as they emerge out of it, while the rest of them are covered in soot and trying to wipe things out, there she is. And I think he even says there's not a single crease or wrinkle on her tulaba. It's just it's not even physically altered. Forget about the dirt. It's not even physically out of place. And once again, that thematically shows us how this journey that all these guys are undertaking, the Segulate tool and Envy, it's not going to be about the peril of their journey, because usually some of these quests are about the perils that you face in the quest itself. Whereas the quest journey that Lady Envy, the Segule, and Talk are on, as we know, they don't really face too many perils on the way. They kind of murder their way right into the heart of the Panian domain. And the point of all of these characters traveling is in the resolution itself, rather than in the perils of the quest. So Lady Envy coming face to face with Anamander Rake, Tool finally having the confrontation with Mock, Baljag, and Talk the Younger. Then there's a lot of stuff about the whatever the old wolf spirits and things like that. So the entire point of that quest was not the journey, but the destination, as opposed to many quests in Malazan, where it's Malazan, whatever, where it's the journey and not the destination, right? So here it's the destination and not the journey. And this is symbolized by the fact that Lady Envy there isn't even a spot of dirt on her clothes as she passes through this cloud of volcanic ash.
Yeah. And I think it's also symbolic of how she moves through life and through the situation she finds herself in, that she has a certain level of remove, that she's not overly affected by the things that happen around and to her. Almost like she sees everything that happens around her like it's there for her entertainment, and she's going to come out just fine the other side, which I think is why Talk ultimately decides to leave, because he realizes that she may have good intentions of keeping him alive, but she also could just as easily forget about him at an inopportune moment. And should he be killed in that situation, that she'd be okay. She'd come out of it just fine. And then when he does in fact die, she has a moment with him of just sort of, oh, you were an idiot, you should have stayed with me. And she seems sad about it, but then she brushes it off and she's spotless again.
But to
And
be fair, she wasn't the only person telling Talk, you were an idiot, you should have stayed with me. We as readers have been telling Talk the same thing for the last, whatever, 300 or 400 pages since Talk leaves. And that's one of the ironies, that here we have one of the most charming and alluring characters in the entire series. And look at the price that you have to pay when you think you're above that. Look at the price that you have to pay when your pride and your self-esteem, so to speak, is tied into her manipulation. Because look at how Fisher handles it. The way Fisher handles Lady Envy's attraction to him is a total contrast to the way that Talk handles it. As in, when you read the limited, now granted, we don't really get to see much of Lady Envy and Fisher. We should have seen more in the 10 big books, but we don't really see much of it. We do see them kind of meeting, talking, hooking up once in a while, but we don't really get a big romance, do we?
No, and it's almost done with a sense of that that he gets to see the real her that the readers don't, that this is her private side. And so not even the readers get to be privy to that, only Fisher does. I remember wondering if he also gets to see her messy, like her hair messed up, if she's not spotless around him, because I don't think with him it all just bounces off. I think that I actually think they had a real connection, and she allowed herself to actually have genuine feelings for him in a way that I don't believe she did for Talk.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, it's kind of once again a tale on the importance of self-esteem. Fisher sees himself completely differently from the way Talk the Younger is. In fact, even when he meets Lady Envy, he's like, oh, you make fun of my scars. I used to be handsome. I'm ugly now. People don't want to look at my face, blah, blah, blah. Talk suffers from this inferiority complex. And that's a big reason for why he's an idiot who just leaves them and then goes away to get tortured by the lizard matron or whatever. Whereas Fisher actually has the self-esteem and the confidence to deal with it. He might be cynical, Fisher might be a cynical person, but ultimately he sees himself as being worthy of being Lady Envy's partner, lover, whatever, despite being immortal. And that should be a big lesson. I mean, the only other parallel I can think of is Tihol and Bug, once again, where you have this being that's thousands of years old, forming a sort of a mortal bond with the mortal, forming an emotional bond with the mortal. And in both cases, it's the mortals are not people who think lowly of themselves. The mortals are both individuals who think very highly of themselves. And this, I think, is quite attractive to ascendants who are looking to form bonds. To a certain extent, you could make this argument with Colat and Whiskey Jack, or Adamander Rake and Whiskey Jack as well, right?
Yeah.
What drew them was that even among mortals, this was clearly quite an exceptional case. And this was clearly someone with self-esteem and confidence, and someone who wouldn't feel out of place having a bond with an immortal. Talk clearly felt completely out of place having any kind of bond with Lady Envy. And eventually, I think Lady Envy would have gotten bored of him. Whereas with Fisher, they make a much better couple, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree completely. I want to talk a little bit too about her sister and her father and those names. Because
So which sister?
Are we going into Forge of Darkness spoilers here?
No, no. I was just being facetious, right? As in, I am not a Forge of Darkness expert, as you know.
Neither am I. So, so we'll leave that aside. Although, there's some good stuff to unpack there. But we all do things we regret when we're younger. Not that I'm sure she regretted it, but what the impact of having of sort of those names and the way Draconis raised them. And I'm not referring to things from Forge of Darkness. I'm actually thinking about in Toll the Hounds, when she realizes that Spite is in the city. It's the only time we actually see her engage, like that we actually see her being envious or living up to her namesake, is with her sister. And I was thinking about how I had that tendency when we're with our parents and our brothers and sisters, we sort of regress to who we are within that family unit. And that I think that's sort of what we see with Spite and Envy, that her behavior with her sister is not necessarily who she is, but more of a relationship or a dynamic that they've been trapped in so long they can't behave any other way around each other.
So Jen, as you know, I am a twin, right? So, and as you know, my family is back in the country and the house is buzzing. So most of these people are on the other side of the door, so to speak. But I can give you my perspective as a twin, right? Now, with twins, I think people often underestimate the extent of the rivalry, as in when you're regular brothers or regular sisters or whatever, when you're regular siblings, even though there is an inherent rivalry that can spring up, with twins, it's imagine. So when my brother and I were growing up, it was like whenever the report cards, the marks came in, it would be like, okay, so how much did you get in maths? And then how much did this person get in maths, right? So how much, so which one's better looking? Which one's better at sports? Which one is more popular? Which one is funnier? Which one gets more marks? Because you're in the same environment and you have the same friends and you're the same age, and therefore all competitive endeavors is with the other person. So even if my brother had been a year younger than me or a year older, it would have been very, very different. But because we were the same age, we constantly had to compete. And once again, with Envy and Spite, now I don't want to ramble on too much here about twins, but Envy and Spite are very much like how my brother and I are, in the sense that not that we want to like kill each other or whatever, not most of the time anyway, occasionally, yes. But in the sense that with some twins, you see there very clearly being one dominant twin and one passive twin. As in, sometimes with some twins, we clearly see that one is more outgoing and more popular, blah, blah, blah. And the other's a bit geekier and whatever, the passive one. Whereas with some twins, we see both of them being quite dominant and both of them constantly competing with each other. It's a rivalry, the Envy and Spite rivalry. And that's exactly the kind of dynamic that my brother and I have as well. I would say maybe I'm more like Spite than Envy, or maybe I mean, the two of them are quite similar anyway, but on that point of her being envious and this being the first time that we see her being jealous, there's an awesome, as you know, confrontation that they have in Toll the Hound. So Spite already knows way back in the Bone Hunters that she is traveling to Darujistan in order to confront her sister. She sees that as being an integral part of the war between the gods. Envy, on the other hand, is just doing her own thing. She has no idea Spite's on her way. She finds out through Iskar al-Pust, if I'm not mistaken, that her sister is in the city, or through someone, right? Yeah. And there's this great scene where Spite attacks Lady Envy's estate with this fireball, this magma ball sorcery that she conjures, and she just decimates the entire estate. And Lady Envy is watching from the shadows, and she's like, oh, damn her, she's so good. Why does she have to be so good? And she's so envious. And then later on in the fight, we see Lady Envy doing something which Sister Spite is surprised about. And she's so spiteful about it. She's like, oh, that bitch, how dare she be that good? How dare she be better than me, blah, blah, blah. So they both think that the other is better. Lady Envy thinks Sister Spite is actually better, stronger. And Sister Spite thinks Lady Envy is more skilled and Lady Envy is jealous of her sister, and Sister Spite is spiteful of her sister, because they're both equals, but they have no idea that they're equals. Yeah, go on.
Oh, well, and I think it's telling that that's the only time we really see that side of them. That we see all of these other aspects to them, but when they're together, it really feels like, yeah, they're falling back into these roles that no matter how many hundreds of thousands of years you live, when you're with your siblings, you're still going to revert back to that same kid you were fighting for dominance, right? Or whatever the dynamic might be. And I also wonder how much of that would have happened anyways, because I think you're right, but there's a point in there where someone talks about, I can't remember who it was, about the fact that Draconis very specifically tried to create that competition and to drive a wedge between them, because he knew how powerful they would be if they bonded together.
So guess who says it?
Who is it?
They say it.
Who?
So yeah, so they have this confrontation, right? And it's getting bigger and bigger, and they're about to kill each other. And all of a sudden, and once again, this is where I need to kind of bring in my own personal experiences, because when you're identical twins, sometimes this happens where you're in the middle of something and all of a sudden you both realize instantaneously that there's another thing going on. So they're fighting, and all of a sudden they sense Anomander Rake's death. They don't even speak to each other. They just stop fighting, and they look at each other and they're like, hey, we would be unstoppable if the two of us just went up there and took that sword right now. And they even say the arrangements can be discussed later. The sort of the exact distribution of power can be discussed and hashed out later. So here they are, ready to kill each other, and they have this rivalry and enmity that goes back thousands of years. And in a split second, Anomander Rake's death stops them. They don't even need words. They just look at each other and they immediately know. And as they walk together towards Dragnipur is when the two of them have that monologue, where Draconis always made sure that the two of them did not get along. He intentionally made sure that there was always a sense of unease between the two of them, because he knew that if the two of them got together, nobody would be able to stop them. And as soon as we hear that, there's a great scene where the Hounds of Light or the Hounds of Shadow, I can't remember, scamper. Because the whole point of Toll the Hound so far is that for 1,000 pages, we've now seen these hounds converging towards Darujistan. We hear howls in the distance and all that. The Hounds of Light and the Hounds of Shadow are really hyped up, and there's Kasa and the Segule Second and Crocus, and even Kasa's like, we're going to die. There are too many of them, right? Not even I and all these people. He asks Crocus for his name, and he's like, we might as well know each other's names before we die, right? This Kasa all along with like the Segule Second and all that. And yet, when Envy and Spite walk through that alley, the dogs just scamper from their sorcery. The hounds run from Envy and Spite. They have absolutely no answer to their sorcery. I wish that had gone on for a little longer, but just as the two of them get to the sword, a figure appears and we don't hear We don't see who the figure is. And the two of them are like, ah, fuck. And they just leave. They're like, okay, you know what? They immediately just change their tone and they're like, oh, we guess this was never a good idea. And they just leave. And we find out much later that it was Kaladin Brood.
Yeah.
That Kaladin Brood turns up and he kind of says, Dragnipur is not for you guys. So I wish we could have seen Kaladin Brood versus Envy and Spite, because that would have been nice. But overall, I think that's what you're referring to. And that is why Draconis did not want them to be united.
You get a nice little tier there. So we've got like the Hounds and then Spite and Envy, and then Kaladin comes and they're like, yep, not worth it. Yeah. We'll try again
so
another time.
We have Casa and Crocus and blah, blah, blah. And then we have the Hounds. And then we have Lady Envy, blah, blah, blah. And then we have Kaladin.
It's sort of like the small fish getting eaten by the bigger fish that gets eaten by the bigger fish, except that they all see the bigger fish coming and get out of there.
And then in the end, we get fish even bigger than Kaladin Brood and Anamander Rake to give them whatever closure, which is when we find out that the little girl is Mother Dark. So there's an extra tier of whatever that's added as well. If that little girl does turn out to be Mother Dark, right?
The one of the
Arathana or whatever, yeah. In Told the Hounds, yeah.
Yep. She is.
So I mean, go on. You were going to say something?
No. I was actually going to say one of my goals is to keep it relatively short, so they're nice and easy for people to watch, and then we can just keep doing more of these kind of quick and easy collabs in the future. So I was going to ask you if there were any last topics you wanted to cover, anything you think we didn't hit on that we should have.
So the only topic that I want to cover, which is the topic that I always want to cover when people discuss Lady Envy, I've mentioned it several times already, but I'll mention it again, is the great scene with Picker and Blend watching Lady Envy talk to Anamander Rake at the end of Memories of Ice, and they're just gossiping about her. For some reason, I always remember that scene. For some reason, I always found it so funny, because you have such a big contrast. You have these gruff, rugged, female Malazan soldiers who are a complete subversion of the general fantasy trope where the women are damsels in distress. And these are like these two tough infantry soldiers, female soldiers, Pick and Blend. And on the other side, you have someone who on the surface looks like the stereotypical epic fantasy female character, a hot young woman. But it turns out that what we know at this point, that she is a complete subversion of that trope as well. So it was nice to see Picker going, my God, look at her Tulaba. There's not a single crease on it. There's not a single wrinkle on it. And I think it's Blend of Picker who are like, some women live in a completely different universe from us, right? Or some women have all the luck. Some women get all that. I would never look this good. And these are things that we hear women talking about in real life, right? I mean, this is how some women would look at someone like Lady Envy in real life and be like, wow, look at how that Talaba suits her figure. Look at how sort of unwrinkled and unblemished that is. So I don't know why, I just always found that scene really hilarious and enjoyable.
It's one of the best scenes, and then them sort of gossiping about her conversation with Rake, like
there's something more there.
Yeah, they got a history together. And then right before that, so I think a lot of the humor with Envy tends to come from the fact that she takes things very literally. It's not that she can't doesn't understand like sarcasm or facetiousness. She does, but she doesn't always pick up on it, at least not right away, and sort of just takes people at their word, and doesn't necessarily understand the subtext. And I think part of that is just that self-absorption, that this is sort of how she copes with that long life, this viewing everything as entertainment, right? So that she's having a conversation with Tool about something, and Tok says, what a lovely lady. And she goes, thank you. And he's like, yeah, that was not what I meant, and realizes it would be a really bad idea to explain to her that he was being sarcastic. Um, and then, and so we have all these really great humorous moments like that up till the end. And then we have that absolutely heartbreaking one where she is, I think, fighting up the stairway with the bridge burners and asks, will this take long? And
They say
Ticker
no, sarcastic.
says, no, it won't. And she's like, okay, great. And, it takes her a minute. She does get it eventually, but it takes her a second to realize, oh, what she meant was, no, it won't take long at all for us to die. Like we're all, we can't fight this. And in the moment that it takes her to understand what Picker meant by that, half of them are slaughtered.
Yeah, yeah. And I also saw it as her not expecting them to be sarcastic or witty, because the way I saw it was she has certain preconceived notions about certain types of people, and she has her own notions over who is witty, who is metaphorical, whose word should be taken literally, whom can we have witty banter with. She's quite fixed on those things. And I don't think she quite expected that from these ordinary Malazan soldiers. She was not expecting them to give her this sarcastic, gruff reply in the heat of battle, because she, and once again, when has she ever been a foot soldier? What does she know about the humor of foot soldiers in the whatever foxhole or whatever, right? So she doesn't even get that. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I remember them saying this won't take that long, and later on she's like, why did you tell me? I could have helped all of you. As in, Trots could have been saved. Most of the many, because I think Trots dies with them, and he's with them when they fight. So many of them could have actually been saved if, number one, Picker had been more literal, or number two, if Lady Envy had been more capable of picking up on soldier humor, your area of expertise, Jen.
She wants witty banter. I'm telling you that she should spend more time with the soldiers, because that's where it's at.
Always.
Yeah, I agree. So it's it's one of those things where I think that he's using this humor to set us up for what ends up being an ultimately heartbreaking moment, where that second of misunderstanding leads to so many deaths, and it's deaths of people we really have come to care about. But I also think it's an example of the sort of compassion she exhibits, in that she is not always necessarily aware of what others around her are going through, but if she's made aware, she's always willing to help out, to do her best to stop the suffering of others, right?
I mean, I hope so. As
Well,
yeah, go on.
I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm the only one who had this impression, but I think the first time through there was this sort of, there was very much a feeling that is, in as much as we have heroes and villains in these books, which we don't, that Envy and her sister very much fall on the side of the bad guys more than the good guys. And at least my first time through, and that then with each subsequent reading, I had a deeper understanding of sort of her and her actions, and how much of this idea of who she is comes from other people that have their own history and issues with her that are not necessarily related to whether or not she's a compassionate or empathetic person, right?
Yeah, yeah. And in general, I don't think she sort of likes to flaunt that either, because when Tok and Tool first meet Lady Envy, she just wants to tell them that she's an ordinary person. But Tool immediately goes, that's Lady Envy, that's the daughter of Draconis. And Lady Envy is like, ah, shit, this Tilanaimas knows too much. Whereas if you contrast that with Sister Spite introducing herself to Mapo and Iskaral Pust in the Bone Hunters, she very clearly says, listen, I am spiked. I'm here, I'm scheming. You're a part of my scheme. I will now be, I'm the one who betrayed you. I'm the one who sent the beast to separate you from your friend. But my schemes and plans have changed. I will therefore now be escorting you on your journey towards your friend again. Whereas Envy doesn't even want that. So Envy is far more interested in just coming across as a normal person and playing around with normal people that way, while Spite is far more of an overt schemer.
All right. That's about it. Not bad. I don't know how long we've been talking, but I know usually, I think every other collab I've got in has come in.
Have we been going for an hour?
All right, that's not bad. That's like half the time of the rest of my collabs, so we're not doing too bad. It's a little shorter than usual.
Well, listen, by our standards, an hour for a collab is quite short. I mean, as you were saying, we are both known for sort of, well, I am known for droning on and on, while you are known for being more gracious, but a collab with me always stretches on the time factor, Jen. You know that at this point.
Oh, there are so many more things I could have said, but I want to keep to my commitment to not putting out like really long collabs and having some short ones. And I hope you'll come back and do it again, because I had a blast.
Anytime, Jen. You know this, so you just need to, you are Commissioner Gordon and I'm Batman. You just need to put out the bat sign, the Ruthan Badd sign or whatever out in the skyline, and I will appear. Fear not. All
right. Well, you're putting out bringing in too many genres into this.
Hey, it's Malazan. Come on.
All right. Well, thanks again. I had a blast, and talk to you later.
Bye, guys.
Bye.